Hi again. Me again. Okay. I'm here to help everyone stretch their legs for a second. We're at that point. Just like move your arms. We bring some chairs out. I was listening to Anin and Blamo, and one of the things they remind me of is how often I get told when people are using payment pages, how it brings the alternate payment methods into the store, right? If you don't have it on POS, now suddenly you can use that methodology to bring all these BMPLs to your actual physical stores. So we've seen that get used time and time again. I hope we're now ready for the next part of this program. We get to do the panel now and bring up our esteemed guests. So help me welcome first Enrico Ferigolli. He is the retail executive omnichannel at Pick n Pay and co-founded of the Bottles app and scaled that and exited that to Pick n Pay. Next up, Marc. He's the, please help me. He's the head of B2B Ecommerce at Shoprite Group and has spent 25 years working on digital innovation projects across Africa. And lastly, Octavius Vermooten. He's the CFO, Takealot. He was the CFO of Mr. D and also has worked at Shoprite across Africa in online retail. Thank you very much for joining us. Rahul, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, guys. Takealot, Pick n Pay, and Shoprite on the same stage. Excellent. No, but what was really fascinating as we were discussing, this opportunity for online retail across the continent and starting with South Africa, is they each represent different aspects of digital commerce. Yeah. So what we're going to hear about today, from grocery delivery to B2B to everything else under the sun, it's going to be very interesting perspective. So maybe let's start with that, right? Peach was part of this Worldwide Works report where we've, the stats indicate that digital commerce or online retail in South Africa is going to go from 70 billion rands, hopefully soon dollars, but 70 billion rand that it sits at today to over 100 billion rand by the end of 2026. How are each of you thinking about, this opportunity? How do you think bigger? And what are some of, how have you seen this change your businesses? Yeah.
You want me to start?
Absolutely.
You're really looking at me. Okay. First of all, thank you for having me here today. And we've been a Peach customer for many, many years.
Yeah.
I think we were probably one of the first, right? Not the first.
I think I almost...
Right?
Well,
the first on-demand app,
yeah,
potentially.
you were.
Yeah.
It started with liquor delivery, if I remember back in the day.
Yes. A lot of fraud.
To
a lot of
fraud. Vegetables. It's a natural transition.
A lot of headers on to the wrong places. But thank you for having us or having me. There's a lot that has been happening over the last few years. I think at Pick n Pay. I think internally, we were talking with franchisees in the last week, and one of the few things that I was telling them is that first, for Pick n Pay, Bottles was the first acquisition after Boxer and Score in the probably 90s, right? So I think Pick n Pay was launched the online website many years ago, and then I think probably didn't spend enough in the very early days of on-demand. Yeah. Even though we started partnering with Pick n Pay back in 2018, but it was still like at the arm's length, right? And I think with COVID and with I think with 60/60 coming up, I think we caught a bit of a wake up, to be honest. And I think the last 4 years we invested a lot of money, especially with the businesses. I mean, we've just gone through a substantial restructuring of a balance sheet. We just raised 4 billion, but we still, over the last 4 years, invested an enormous amount of money internally to really grow the business. I think you can see in the growth of ASAP.
And how are you seeing consumers embrace? I mean, yes, obviously I can see your numbers, but how are you seeing consumers? How is that user behavior shift from COVID until now? Because groceries is just a fickle segment, right? Like, I mean, I'll tell you one thing. Like, my wife used to be at the supermarket every day, and now there's a delivery guy every day, maybe 2 in a day. at our house. So
Both ASAP, right? No, six.
exactly.
Look, I think it's actually when we started bottles, I don't think we were fully appreciating at that time. We thought that liquor was a great category to start this, right?
Standardized.
But the reality is that there is not going to be a bigger category in e-commerce other than grocery. Like by 2026 in the US, grocery will be the biggest e-commerce category, right? Because the reality is that, sorry, Takealot, but we eat more than we buy. Unfortunately. So the reality is that it's going to be the biggest category. And what I also find fascinating is how quickly South Africa, specifically as a market, adopted on demand.
Yeah.
We are one of the big markets, right? And I think a lot of the great work that was done by Takealot in the early days, and a lot of the work that with Mr. D relaunching and all the global learnings from process that were brought into the country, we are one of the big markets, right? And if you look at contribution, we are up there with a lot of the more advanced markets.
Okay. Marc, B2B, I mean, that's not traditionally something we associate with digital or online. How are you? How are you seeing this opportunity?
I think that's what makes it really exciting, to be honest, because I think people's mindsets are changing. B2B is definitely a laggard.
Yeah.
People who are shopping on 60/60 or Takealot and sometimes on ASAP, they're wondering, why am I getting this great B2C experience, but when I come to work and I've got to buy a lot of stuff, now I'm sitting in front of a blue screen that's not very exciting, that doesn't tell me a hell of a lot, and I'm putting in some orders, or I'm going through, heaven forbid, an EDI or something like that to place orders. So I'm going to date myself a little bit, but emerging from the dot-com bust, right? So there was the boom. It was a very exciting time to be in North America, but coming out of that, two things emerged out of the dot-com bust. The one was obviously the drive towards how do we make something out of our e-commerce business, and so it came omni-channel and the drive to integrating all our channels. So that was the one thrust, but the other thrust came B2B.
Yeah.
And so I think what we're going to see in South Africa is we're just skimming the surface of that, but that's going to be the next big wave. And companies spend more money than individuals do. And that's the reality. And so B2B represents a great opportunity. And if you can provide a compelling online experience, there's a huge opportunity to capture mind share, capture wallet from a business standpoint.
Yeah, and I think digital payments in the B2B space is still something people are figuring out. For us at Peach also, it's something we continue to.
Yeah. And there are huge challenges to that, right? So to put it into context, what I can't say exactly what it is, obviously, but, we're talking 100 to 200 times the average order value for a B2B transaction than your regular on-demand transaction.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different kettle of fish. There are not too many people who's slapping their credit card down on the table and making that kind of purchase.
It makes great rewards points.
Yeah, it makes one. And you'll be surprised how many companies take full advantage of that, of the rewards points. But the reality is for most people out there, you're more heavily reliant on EFT, credit, et cetera, and potentially digital wallets, which is also in the informal sector is definitely going to be a big player in that space.
We're going to come to the informal sector. I'm super curious about that. But Octavius, I mean, you guys were pioneers with online retail. How are you? What does the next few years look like for Takealot? How do you embrace this, this boom that's potentially coming to South Africa? How do we make it happen?
I'm glad it's finally paying off, because ultimately in 2010, when we just started, we were the only player. And ultimately, the most difficult part of e-commerce, I believe, is to go and change somebody's habit, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. You're telling a customer, listen, I don't need to go to the liquor store or to the grocery store or to a general merchant. We want to go and get A, B, and C. And it's very difficult if you're the only player beating on that drum. And obviously, we are fortunate because we're part of a bigger group, so we get a lot of insights from the process company. And we can track it all everywhere from the online penetration as a percentage. So we always knew what the potential was, but it is expensive. And ultimately, it's very difficult if you're the only player to go and say, listen, but there is an alternative. There is an easier way to get your goods. So I think, obviously, COVID came and then everybody jumped on. And I think that's making much easier to go and calibrate a customer in order to go and change their behavior and say, listen, but if I can go and get my liquor on store, why can't I get my TV on store? Why can't I manage my business on store? So I think the fact that there's more players driving that is ultimately making it easier. The future for Takealot, we've got a business plan set. I think it's the least competitive online space will ever be, but it's also much easier in order to go and get the message across. Yeah. Because ultimately, if you're sitting at 6%, there's still a very, very big part of the pie. The only caveat that I see sometimes is that South Africa is not unique. South Africa is very unique. Everybody loves saying, but plotting it over Latin America or other emerging markets and look at the step change as well. South Africa is a unique market in the sense that where we are demographically, but also where we are socially. The discrepancy within spend is very, very big. So I think the opportunity is there and we're very excited about it and it's there for the taking, but it's not a linear growth compared to what other markets are seeing.
So let's talk about that a little bit. And I think it leads into what Marc was mentioning earlier around new segments, new customer bases, the informal markets in South Africa. I mean, 80% of the population is in the informal sector and transacting in that sector. How do you think about, like, if we need to hit 100 billion, go from 6% to 10% to 20% of online, of the share of online retail, how do we make this happen? Like, how are you at Takealot, and then we'll come to Marc and to Enrico, like, how do you think about accessing these segments?
No, it's definitely something that we've been thinking a lot over the years, and this year's ultimately executing on it as well. So you would have read in the press from April, we started work with the Gauteng government, ultimately going into township initiatives as well. And we just came from 2 weeks ago, we also hosted a township initiative actually as well. So there is focus. Our Takealot look at it is not just from tapping into the customer, but driving the whole ecosystem around townships. So being a big marketplace player, we are a enabler for small SMEs to have a national reach very easily. So it is ultimately uplifting, giving people an opportunity to say, listen, but you don't just need to go and transact and service your local community. You can actually go by very few steps, give your product a national reach. We also try and tap into the customer, which is a bit more difficult, but we've got specific programs that's currently running. So we launched a personal shopper program where we actually have people on the ground ultimately explaining, we give them collateral, and they earn also a living from selling goods on Takealot. So it is still infant days, but it's definitely something that we are definitely focusing on because that's where the growth needs to come. The higher LSM, the easy pickings, those ones have already been done.
Yep.
Ultimately, it's the mass market, the credit opportunities are there, and then ultimately the broader, lower LSM, that's where the real opportunities, and that makes the bulk up of the retail market. So it is something that we are definitely focusing on, but very infant days, but we're excited about it, and ultimately that's where the real impact will be. So
interesting. B2B, does it even exist, or what level are you guys thinking at?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think maybe just quickly the challenges that your average business maybe is facing in the township. So the one is obviously very price sensitive. Margins are exceptionally low. So that's the first challenge. So, constantly sourcing product at the lowest possible price. Access to inventory is a real challenge. And then once you've got the inventory, keeping it secure and being able to store it is another real challenge. So a lot of these small businesses spend an inordinate amount of time literally driving from one wholesaler to the next, looking for the cheapest price. And then hopefully where you find the cheapest price, you find the inventory is available. Then they've got to figure out how to get it back to their premise. And all of that takes up a lot of time, a lot of petrol, a lot of cost for them. And ultimately that's time. It's a cash flow issue, but it's time that they're not spending with their own customers. So our offering that we've recently launched is all around that. So how do we, through online, show them the best possible price with extra savings and all the other good things that come with some of the Shoprite offerings. How do we show them very clearly what inventory we have on hand at the closest location, and then allow them to pay for it easily and get it delivered. And all of that should result in them ultimately having more time to build their own businesses and to make their businesses more successful and spend more time with their customers. So that's the goal, and that's what we're after with the offering that we launched out.
It sounds very logical. I guess, the devil's in the details as you roll this out, because as you explain it, it's like, oh, why aren't we doing this faster, right?
Why wouldn't anybody do it?
Exactly.
And that's where B2B is so, in a lot of respects, a lot more challenging than B2C, because it's very relationship based. So if you want to get online adoption, it actually starts in the stores. And if you're going to put together an online site and you're going to throw it out there, I think your level of traction will be incredibly low.
Yeah.
So for us, the solution is as much about reinforcing and providing with our in-store sales associates with that information and the ease of use and visibility to the customer's purchasing behaviors. The whole omni-channel, funnily enough, is even more important in the B2B space than it is in the B2C space, in my opinion, for that exact reason. And then you have, of course, all the haggling that goes with it, because people expect to haggle, right? So they're businessmen, they want to haggle. So how do you provide your sales associates in the store with the ability to override prices, see what inventory they have on hand, and then support the customers throughout their journey, make sure that they are, clearly they understand exactly where their order is in the process, and make it easy for them to either collect or deliver to them. And so that piece of it and supporting your sales associates is a critical leg in generating adoption.
Okay. Just maybe adding to what Marc was saying, because we were having a conversation just before the start of the summit. I've been in South Africa for 13 years, and I've experienced this from a manufacturer perspective. I was at Unilever, and at Unilever, the discussion about how do we sell our product into spaza stores, how do we enable business to business, was very topical 13 years ago. And Unilever went on to create their own distribution models that were very difficult to operate, right? And never really got it right, where I think that you guys today have the shop in the township, great purchasing power. You can really break that opportunity open in a way that I don't think that all these different pieces of the right ordering technology, being in the township already, having the right price point from the start, nobody had all of these pieces together. So I think you're going to do an exceptional work for the informal settlement. I'm very excited to see what you guys are going to do.
I appreciate it. You're making me want to take my comment back on ASAP now.
There's so much love between the retailers, right?
Just because it's business to business, right? With Neil, you didn't say that. Yes. So
you guys, how are you thinking about, on demand in these segments?
Yeah. So look, the reality is that since we pivoted from liquor to grocery, very early on we started operating also in township. We had a lot of stores in townships. I also think that the term township in 2024, it's actually like you can't call Alex and Soweto a township, and they're not the same thing, right? So Soweto is not even a township today, right? We have 4 stores. Some of our biggest franchise stores are actually in Soweto, right? Yeah. So big business, big opportunity. I think that in those areas, I think that we've come around to finding the right way to deliver and the right product ranges that we require there. I think there's still a big opportunity in proper township. Like Alex, a lot more difficult, right? A lot more difficult in terms of, you were talking about security of the stock. Same thing. We tried. A lot more difficult in terms of making sure that our drivers are safe. Yeah. But it's by no means something that we're going to stop doing. So something that we really, really focus on. I also don't think that is necessarily informal doesn't mean township. Yeah. Informal also mean non-urban areas, right? And again, I spent the whole week last week with our franchisees, right? Most of or half of our business is in franchise stores in small towns like in Escort, in KZN, in Kuruman, and you need to see the level of the exceptional customer service deliveries that these guys are doing today. And I was talking specifically to the northern region, so Limpopo and Mpumalanga, the amount of deliveries that each of our franchise stores does every week to lodges, right? In Limpopo, exceptional, right? 100 kilometers away from the store, they still go and do it, right? The difference is where I think that the next level is going to be is on providing that a easy to use ordering platform, easy to use payment model, because they do it today, right?
Yeah.
They've been doing it for years, but it's a phone call. I don't know if you don't have this, what is the alternative? How do I pay? A whole lot of issues that actually are customer facing app already solves, right? And it's about bringing that layer on. So yeah.
But I think you're bringing up a very interesting point here, right? Like that all of this physical interaction with your customer, it's starting to solve for trust, right? And I think one of the things we found in the research was that trust is a big factor. So maybe I want to go to Octavius and ask him, like, and maybe then back to you guys as well. How do you solve, like, what do you think of consumer? I mean, I remember people were afraid to use cards online in South Africa. I think COVID pushed people out of the comfort zone to make them try new things. How does trust evolve going forward? What are you doing to continue to build that consumer trust?
Ultimately, without the trust, you won't have a consumer. And I think it's not just about the payment aspect, but it's about the underlying psychic of people. So usually you go into a store, you touch a product, you look at it, you feel it. In the past, you could haggle for a better price. Other times, you just go and then you pay. But to go and change that cycle, you say, listen, I'm looking at a screen here. I haven't seen the product, I haven't touched it, I haven't eaten it, but now you expect me to pay for it and hope that it arrives. So I think that's the reason we trust was so important. And ultimately, the fundamentals of Takealot has always been to say you solve for the customer. The customer's need needs to be addressed. And it's not just on making payments easy, but it is the whole value chain. When you go on Google Ad Search and you click to a link and it gets redirected onto your app, that you actually have the product. Ensuring that when you say that it's going to be delivered in X amount of period, then that you actually keep to that. If something falls off, or if something happens, you inform the customer. And also the after sales is so important. It is ultimately the whole chain. And unfortunately, we mess it up every now and then, very few. But then you need to double up and make sure that you make it right with the customer. Because if that trust is broken, it's very, very hard to go and convince a customer ever to go and do that. But it's not just a single piece. It's the whole value chain. It's the whole cycle of the customer.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's the entire user experience, right? From getting a real product to the best price to on-time delivery. And I think you guys have done a lot to build that consumer trust for the entire ecosystem sitting here in the audience as well. Marc, B2B, how does that change?
It just becomes way more important. I mean, I think I touched on it earlier. B2B is relationships. Companies expect to have relationships with each other and talk to a human. Eventually, you can convince them to self-serve, and that's obviously the lowest cost to serve for everybody, and where we'd like our customers to go. But you got to do the hard yards up front, person to person. There's just no way to get around it. And then lastly, it sounds so obvious, but it really is the crux. You got to deliver. You have to physically deliver. I always say to everybody, I can create the best websites in the world, right? It can have all the bells and whistles and be so cool. I can have 50 different payment methods, but if the product never gets to the customer, and meets the customer expectations at that point, you're dead in the water. So, and if you look at the on-demand solutions, that's really why they've been successful and why they've grown so much, is because they made a promise, and 98% of the time they deliver. And so you just can never lose sight of the physical element. We live in the digital world. That's the world that we love to occupy. But you've got to conquer the physical world at the end of the day. Otherwise, you're just never going to overcome that trust barrier.
Absolutely. Enrico, does it?
We were always saying that you're only as good as your last delivery, right? That's the challenge, right? Is that yes, you have a great app and you have a great this and great that, but at the end of the day, you're only as good as the last delivery to your customer. So that's really, for me, one of these three elements. I think very quickly, three things for me on trust. One is delivery, of course, and operations in general, like the quality of operation. For me, specifically in on-demand grocery, the single biggest barrier to online grocery adoption in the world is the perception that we're never going to pick the apples the way you would pick your apples, right? And we spend an insane amount of time with all of our stores on a daily basis to really educate our pickers to pick the way they would pick for themselves.
I'm going to come to rotten banana.
It's
spoiled app.
difficult to think, but actually it is the single biggest barrier to online grocery adoption, and it's something that almost angers me, because I'm like, we should, and we are going to be able to deliver that level of quality that ultimately you expect from yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So every picker would shop. We just need every picker to shop
For themselves.
right? The third piece, that again specific to grocery, I think it's the challenge that a bunch of our products, probably 20% of our range, has a price per kilo and not a defined price of $29.99. So anything that has to do with pre-authorization, finalization of transaction, refund to wallet. I think at both Pacer and 6060, we launched a wallet thinking that it was going to solve our issues, and it made both of our problems worse, right? Yeah. And we both tried to undo wallets, right? Because like now the money is stuck in someone's wallet. They're like, no, I want my money back, right? Yeah. But it took us a long time to get to a very seamless pre-authorization, finalization of the transaction that is seamless for the customers, and that definitely didn't help to build trust in the first few years.
Absolutely, and I've had a few hundred conversations with both of you around payment finalization and overs and unders. And
yes.
Them. Okay, 18 seconds on the clock. Any quick closing words from the three of you? Well, let's go around one by one. Enrico, then Marc. No one's volunteering.
Look, I not specifically. I think that it has been a very good conversation to have here, and thank you for the last 8 or 9 years together.
Absolutely, and hopefully another 10 years ahead.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Marc.
Yeah, I don't think I have much more to say. I think we live in exciting times in South Africa. I mean, I'm personally very pleased that I'm here now after doing a bit of a world tour. Because I really think this is an exciting place to be and where we're going in the digital space. And so many, and we were chatting about it earlier, there's so many nuances to South Africa that, we can take all the international experience in the world, but none of it will survive, a few days in our informal sector, right? So that's really exciting. But we've got a lot to learn globally, but so much of it we need to make local. And that provides an exciting opportunity, I think, for all of us, and a big world for us to conquer, which I think should be fantastic.
Absolutely. Octavius.
I think sharing the sentiment, the excitement, I always joke with my team if they come to me with problems and say, but it's too much, or the transactions are too much, or still doing stuff manually. I said, listen, but you need to go and get a solve for it, because this is the smallest it will ever be. And I think that's the mindset that we also think this is the smallest e-commerce will ever be in the whole of South Africa. So the adoption will just grow. The payment industry is very, very exciting, and there's been a lot of changes. And I think now that there's multiple players, multiple stakeholders, all of them beating on the same drum, it will just bound to grow. So very excited as well. And looking forward to looking back today in 2020, 2030, you said, listen, look where we started. So exciting times ahead.
Octavius, if your team is still doing things manually, you really need to switch to us.
No, I looked at all the solutions, and now everything looks familiar.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate that we need to go and build everything ourselves as opposed to having a solution like that. But payments is tricky, and having one marker file on your bank statement and tying that back to 100,000 transactions.
Not easy at all.
Yeah, but that's why you guys are here, to make life for everybody else easier.
Well, thank you for that sales plug in the end. Thank you, and appreciate this. Thanks, guys. Enrico, thanks. Sorry. Thanks. You can leave.